my folks are here. Are all your folks here? One more, one of my. I did. Because I usually like. But you have yeah. So for you all, these are I watch like all master's level students, but you know this is kind of good for us, and we've got a bunch of other people here with us just to kind of talk about a couple of things that kind of relate either directly or indirectly, and then you'll be in here for the first hour. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, and then we'll talk about next week. We'll talk about that.
I mean, it's like, obviously, it's like terrifying, but like, it's like I love reading myself. You know what I mean? It's like, your friend. You never leave something down. I'm just so, did I move her? I'll come back there. No, we should be on the Rachel one. Like, we've been together since 8th grade. Yeah, they spend a lot of time. We are. No, I grew up in Just checking her. We're just trying to get our online person on. Oh, you can hear us guys? I love it. What did I just like? We can't just hear. We're trying to talk like I want to get my okay, we can hear you. I don't have our video on because I think he's recording in Integrity, but we can turn our video on if you want to, but it won't work with two videos. So, it's weird. So it's really up to,
I think it is recording.
yeah, Integrity is recording.
And is that okay, or do
Just
you wanna
one.
do it another way? No, I'm just doing it because Dr. wanted it to be able to send out the phone.
Yeah. Grace, are you okay if you can't see us, or will that be super awkward for you? Okay. Yeah, the computer online audio things will not allow us to like have a video and record it and have a video and talk to you live. It's a big pain. You would think 2019, but you know, it's fine. Do you wanna introduce anything, or you want me to go ahead and get started? Dr. Blackwell.
To my class, these are folks here from the university that you probably need to know, and maybe you're thinking about what you can do if you wanted to do something else before you're going into another program or a master's program. And I'm just very thankful Dr. Quinn had made this suggestion last semester, and so I know my class is small, but this is, hopefully we're just trying to reach a lot more other folks out there because we've got some good global initiatives and some good programming going on. And some really good graduate students who are doing some good stuff, and so, Dr. Quinn, thank you, and I'm just gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm Megan Quinn. I'm faculty in the College of Public Health in the Department of Biostatistics and Epidemiology. And Taylor Dula, who you all probably know, and I have been working on some global health initiatives across campus along with some others in this room. But we pulled together a panel for y'all, and I will let them introduce themselves because they're going to do a much better job of that. We have some guided questions that we've come up with just to kind of prompt questions for them, for them to tell you about their either Peace Corps experience or their AmeriCorps experience. And but if you all have questions, we'd love for y'all to ask those. I've already heard their answers because we did a panel like this last year. And I know everybody on either on the panel or on the phone. So we want you guys to have an opportunity to ask whatever questions you want. But if it's kind of like crickets, we'll go ahead and prompt a few questions. We've got those here. And it's just mainly to hear about like what they've done and how they decided to do Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. So we do have one person logged in live through WebEx that you can see, well, and Blakely too, but Grace, who's doing this for us as a returned Peace Corps volunteer. So we'll start with Grace, and then we'll go along the panel this way with just introductions and where they served. So Grace, go ahead. I'm going to record on WebEx too, just in case, because your integrity keeps telling me it doesn't have sound. Thank you, Grace. Rachel?
Yeah. So I'm Rachel Jones. I'm the director of social work at Milligan College. I did my Peace Corps service in the Philippines from 2014 to 2016. I worked at a shelter for girls who had been rescued from trafficking and abuse. Similar to Grace, the best part of my experience there was definitely the people. I've kept in contact with them, and I'm actually going back and taking students with me for 4 weeks in June. And they are just phenomenal. They helped me grow personally and professionally. The worst part can also be related to that as well. Parts of service can be very lonely at times when you are initially integrating, especially if you're going into a country that has been previously colonized, and there's still kind of an expectation with Western people there, specifically white people. And so the beginning of service can be pretty lonely, as well as kind of comparing yourself to other volunteers. My community was very small. My community was the shelter itself, and so my projects were smaller than others who had kind of larger community emphasis. And so the best and worst parts were the people, but you learn how to navigate, and the worst part became the best part. So you just kind of adjust and adapt and figure out how that works for you personally, while still kind of maintaining your own boundaries and personality, kind of as you integrate into their culture as well.
Cool. Hi guys, I'm Lauren. I'm currently in the Community Health Concentration Masters of Public Health here at UTSU. I did my undergrad in Charlotte, North Carolina, at Queen's University, and then I did an AmeriCorps Vista program in New Mexico on Santo Domingo Reservation there. And then for me, my best part and the worst part, yeah, kind of like you were saying, it was like the same thing where I think I was not a part of the culture, and it wasn't a culture I was familiar with, but like learning about like the food and the dance and all like the fun cultural aspects that like we, think of when we think culture was so fun and really wonderful. And then some of the harder parts where they had different cultural views about women and their role in the workplace and that sort of thing was really hard for me to navigate. But like you're saying, yeah, you learn how to deal with it, navigate, and it's super fun. So go ahead, Hannah.
My name's Hannah. I'm also an MPH student for community health. I went to UT Knoxville, graduated in 2016, and then decided to do a year of AmeriCorps NCCC, and then I did that for a year where I worked on had lots of different projects where I did trail building, disaster relief, working on community partnerships, things like that, all across the southwest of the country. And then I decided to do a second year of AmeriCorps, and I did a VISTA position like Lauren, where I was in Knoxville working for a weatherization assistance program. The best part about my service, just to sort of repeat them, was the people. I met people from all over the country, all over the world, going and traveling and doing service projects. The worst part for me, sometimes the people, like you said, getting in different cultures and being in different situations is hard, and you have to sort of navigate and figure things out. But definitely the people were the best part, for sure.
My name's Leah. I'm also an MPH student in the community concentration. I also went to UTK for my undergrad, but I studied anthropology. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Madagascar. I was a health volunteer, so I mainly worked at a health clinic with a midwife, and I had some projects, like I was teaching English, I did a garden. My big thing, though, was working with pregnant women and children under 5. And I guess, just to say something, I'll say the best part of my service was being, like, closer, more in tune with my life, where, like, I just had to do more stuff for my daily life, and you're, like, closer to living, and everything was, like, very local for me. And I think the worst part was, shocker, the cultural isolation, where you just feel alone.
Okay. Well, thanks, y'all. So that gives you guys an introduction to everybody, and for those of y'all on the panel that didn't know each other already, so Grace and Rachel, getting to know everybody else. I'm sure it's nice to hear other people's stories. So does anybody have questions from the crowd yet, or do you want me to get started and ease you into this? Easing you in. Alrighty. Okay. So what made you decide to either serve in Peace Corps or AmeriCorps? And whoever wants to go for it.
I can start with that. So I graduated with my MSW from the University of Kentucky, and I had known for a while that I wanted to do international work, but I didn't really know what context I wanted to do that. I wanted to work with an organization that had a really good reputation because I'm also very cynical of international development organizations as a whole. And so Peace Corps was one that I did a lot of research on. They have a really good reputation that is world known, and so I knew coming back it would also mean a lot, honestly, to have it on my resume. And so I knew that I wanted to do international work, but that's one of the reasons I did Peace Corps was because of their international recognition. I also chose them because for their first for your first kind of 2 months in service, you're just in training, cultural and language training, and then for your first 3 months at your field site, they really just want you to observe and to transition. They actually don't want you to start projects within your first 3 months because they realize the importance of that cultural transition and immersion into your place. And so that was a huge factor for me, was the fact that they took that into consideration of the cultural competency and the significance that it held in the work that we did. And that was very important to me, and not all organizations do that. And so if you're looking for an international opportunity after this, whether you do Peace Corps or something else, definitely look into their training programs and also look into how they talk about cultural competency as part of kind of the culture of their organization. I highly recommend that, and Peace Corps actually tries to do that pretty well with really advocating for your first 3 months of just integrating into your community before you kind of begin service. And so that's why I chose Peace Corps, was because of the intentionality behind that and the reputation that they already had. When you find somebody that has a reputation like that, a lot of times they're going to be held more accountable because they're more in the spotlight. And so having that accountability piece was also important to me, that I knew that they would have because of the recognition that they have worldwide.
Great answer. Others?
I guess we can kind of get on the line. So I graduated from undergrad and knew that after like trying out my field, I was a political science major, decided that I did not want any job in that field and was like, okay, I need to regroup. And so I had like a mentor in college that was an AmeriCorps Vista. And so I'd been thinking about it for a few years and decided I would do that and just do something totally random. And I mean, I did, and I wanted to be in a career in which I was helping people, wanted to go into the nonprofit arena eventually, and figured this would be good on my resume, would open some doors. And then I did mention it earlier, so the project I worked on was a FEMA grant given to the reservation and trying to navigate policy. So it was like a good mix of like undergraduate and then doing something totally new that got me going a different direction.
Makes sense. Do you want to keep going down the line?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
we'll go down the line and then Grace will let you know when it's your turn.
So, my undergraduate degree is in psychology, and can't really do a whole lot with that. I do have my minor was in public health. So, I had a global health class where they brought in returned Peace Corps volunteers, and I found it really interesting, but didn't know if I could commit to the 2 years, ironically. And then also wasn't sure how I felt about doing projects alone in a foreign country. So I stumbled across AmeriCorps ICCC, sort of like she said, I did my research, made sure it was like a legit thing and not some sort of fake program that you don't have to pay for it. But I want to make sure that it was something actually legit. So I just sort of stumbled across it and applied to it on a whim because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Didn't really want to go to grad school right away. Didn't think I would get into grad school right away. And yeah, I just sort of did it on a whim and then did it for 2 years and worked every minute of it. That's why I did it.
I honestly had no idea what I was doing when I joined Peace Corps. I had been stuck in Tennessee for like 10 years. I had just graduated with my anthropology degree, and someone told me I could go halfway across the world and just like be in a culture that I knew nothing about, and I could just sit and like learn. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, I get to learn from a whole different culture. I get to learn a different language. I get to like talk about American culture. And then I thought it was gonna be really awesome to like work at a clinic. That was not my focus. I did not think public health was gonna be like my big focus. Because like a lot of people don't recognize that 2/3 of Peace Corps' goal is cultural exchange. And so having just done an anthropology degree, that really appealed to me. I just thought it was gonna be so cool to do that. And I knew nothing about Madagascar. I didn't ask to go to Madagascar. Peace Corps asked me if I would go there. I didn't tell them a preference, and I was like, I've never even thought about Madagascar. That's gotta be a fun journey. So I was just excited.
All right, Grace, why did you choose to go into Peace Corps? Great. Okay, I'll keep going unless anybody has any burning questions.
So did you all
Yeah.
have, was there a language requirement? Did you have to know how to speak? Like, I'm assuming in the Philippines, was it Spanish or?
The national language is Tagalog, but then a lot of islands have different languages, and so my local language was Cebuano. But then most people that I work with actually spoke English. And so I was really looking forward to learning another language in Peace Corps, and I came out and was still speaking English. And so it just wasn't like a large enough factor to kind of entice me to do all of this study when everyone around me already spoke my language. But that's different everywhere. English is taught in a lot of Filipino schools, especially if you go to high school and then college. So.
But is it a requirement for the program, say, like, do you have to already know how to speak?
There are some. So for me, my
Right.
language was Malagasy. I learned it once I got to country because I've never met anyone in America that even knows that that's a language. But there are certain programs in Peace Corps where you do have to have a certain amount of experience with the language. Most of the time, there's Spanish or French
Yeah,
requirements.
it's mainly South American countries, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but some of them will say they want you to have a certain proficiency. Otherwise, it's just you'll learn it when you get there,
Mhm.
and that's what you do for like the first. For us, it was 3 months. It's not like 2 months for you guys,
Yeah.
but for the first couple months, you learn the language if you need to learn a language, and then you
Mhm.
continue to learn it for your next 2 years.
Yeah. Some countries are going to be more difficult if you have local languages. Because I was picking up on kind of Tagalog, and then they just like ripped it away from me, and then I had to learn a second language. And so some countries, if learning languages is difficult for you, find a country where you would just need to learn one language would be my tip for that. Instead of going to a country where you would have to learn a second language after training on your own can be very difficult.
How were you, I don't mean, does anybody else have a question? I'm sorry, I'm just.
Roger, just
How
to,
were you-
to add to that, Peace Corps' website will tell you if you need a language for that particular rotation. And most of those are, yeah, go ahead, Grace.
So how would you say that you were perceived by the people the communities that you were working with? I mean, because you're obviously coming in representing these organizations, but yet on a bigger scale, here comes an American. Here comes a white American into these particular spaces.
I like to call it like capital A American when I talk about it. Anything you do in your community is America. And you were the only, well, for me, I was the first volunteer to serve in my site, and there were no other Americans like anywhere in our area. There were no other foreigners. There's a lot of French people in Madagascar, but no other foreigners in our area. Occasionally, if you went like a couple hours into town, you would see tourists coming through. But besides that, like, I was a capital A America. Anything I did, like, I would go on runs in the morning, and they'd be like, why do Americans run? It wasn't why do I run, it's why do Americans run? Why do Americans eat this food? Why do Americans listen to this music? So you, like, I definitely was perceived as, like, American. But I will say, this is obviously not true for every country, but for Madagascar, Americans are seen very fondly. There's a really good view of Americans because the only Americans that really spend time in Madagascar are Peace Corps volunteers. So it's a bunch of people that come in, learn the language, and like make really good bonds. In contrast of the French people, French was the colonial power in Madagascar until the 60s. The French people come to Madagascar, and a lot of them are just tourists or they just speak French. They never learn Malagasy. And so as an American, I could show up in a town that I'd never been to before, like a city, get into a taxi, and as soon as I said, like, what you need, and that's like how much is the ride in Malagasy, they turn to me and be like, oh, you're American, aren't you? Just because I'm a white person who knows the language, and French people never learn the language because they can just speak French. So like if you're American, it's a really good place to travel to visit. You'll get invited in for lunch and stuff like that. But besides that, as far as like someone who could like help, sometimes you get like overshot, where it's like sometimes because I was in my clinic, people would think I was a doctor or had any medical knowledge, and I did not. I knew nothing. I can't like give shots or advice. But just by my presence of being like a white person, they thought I was like educated and a professional. And I kind of was educated, kind of professional, but not in the same vibe that they had. I don't know if it was the same for anyone else.
Mine was very different. The organization that I worked with was actually started by a church out in California. And so the organization itself had always had an American presence there. And so the challenge for me was actually kind of breaking down that boundary, because everybody that came was either their boss or gave them money to function. They weren't seen as equal or on par with the rest of the staff there. And so that's where a lot of kind of the loneliness at first came from, was because it took a long time for me to break down that boundary of, I'm here just like you're here. I'm getting paid the same amount. We have similar educational backgrounds. I'm here to do the same things. I'm just here to be an extra resource. I'm not here to be your boss. I'm not here for fundraising. Your job is not dependent on me in any way. And so mine was very different. And then I had to break down that barrier because I was seen kind of similar in kind of that place of authority. And so trying to make friends with that dynamic can be really difficult. And so it took me about 9 months to kind of break that down, and just kind of inviting them over or engaging them in activities or having them over for them to teach me how to cook a Filipino dish, and I would teach them how to cook an American dish. And so just trying to find activities that would kind of put us on the same level is really what it took. And so, yeah, and a lot of that just goes back to kind of their history with Americans. It's going to look different for a lot of countries, and that's going to impact the way that people view you there.
Grace, you have anything to add to it? And Lauren and Hannah, you guys served in the US, but you still were serving in communities that were not communities you were raised in or maybe communities you were familiar in. So can you guys add to the conversation on that? Because even though you were in your home country, like you guys were in very different spaces and with different sort of situations that still may have been culturally different than yours.
Yeah, I think definitely I felt like for me it wasn't like America with a capital A, it was federal government with a capital F, and it was it was immediately very, very distrusted by the community, and I mean probably disliked on some level, just because of what I was representing to them. And then within like my office and the people that I was working on in those spaces, it was definitely a period of like kind of like feeling out like why are you here, and like what is this program, and like what's going on, and those relationships really grew just because that felt more like my community. But then out like on the reservation in the village, that never gained much traction for me. That was really difficult to navigate with a huge like a language barrier, and then AmeriCorps, just because you are in the United States, like there isn't usually a language barrier, and so in this situation there was, and that was difficult. So I was.
What was the tribal affiliation there?
What do you mean?
There on the reservation.
It was Santo Domingo, Pueblo. Yeah. It's like near Navajo Nation would be like the most familiar, but yeah.
For mine, there really wasn't any sort of distrust or anything when I would, because in Triple C, you're on teams.
We should explain the differences between this.
Yeah, I'll speak about in Triple C.
Okay.
You did Vista. So in Triple C, you're placed on teams of like anywhere from 8 to 12 people. And so I was a core member, and then each team has a team leader. And so you're placed on these teams, and you travel everywhere together. You're together 24/7. But in each city that you go to or town, I lived in a national park once. You're placed with a community partner, and so that community partner sort of introduces you to everyone in the community that you need to know. So being introduced by someone that they already trust, there really wasn't an issue with that. But the first thing that popped into my mind, and Dr. Backwell asked this question, in Triple C, you wear uniforms. It is khaki pants. You all look the same. It is khaki, what is the word? Like cargo pants, like huge pockets. It like cinches at the waist. It's adorable. I wish I had a photo. You have like steel-toed boots. You don't always have to wear them. You have like this like belt that would get you through a metal detector. And then you all wear these gray shirts that have the AmeriCorps logo, and then on the back say NCCC. And no one ever knows what NCCC stands for. It's the National Civilian Community Corps. But a lot of people thought we were inmates. And so I can't tell you how many times I got asked if we were like work release, and one of the most interesting times was we were living in Topeka, and we were staying at a church camp, and it was the middle of summer, so there was a church camp there, and there were like young kids, and they were like, we know who you are, but they don't, so like don't be around the kids. Because we had like background checks with them, you do for NCCC. But a parent came up to us when we were cooking dinner one night and was like, so you all are like work release, and asking us all these different questions, and we were like, you have been very friendly and like forthcoming with information, but the whole time they thought we were inmates. So that's the first thing that popped in my mind. Yeah. I mean, we do look like inmates a lot of times. We're on the side of the road cleaning up garbage. So, yeah. Do AmeriCorps. That's great.
I'm gonna feed off of that just briefly because you were talking about kind of your counterpart is what we would call it. So in Peace Corps, you're also given a counterpart in the country that you go to, and that is your person that is there to help you kind of integrate. That's your cultural exchange person. And so that's the person that you can go to if you have questions or concerns, or you're struggling to integrate. Your counterpart is kind of your key person at your site that really helps you, again, kind of meet the people, introduce you to the people that you need to know, and to kind of get you set up in your home community. So we have something very similar to that as well that can be a huge life source for you if you get a really good counterpart. If you don't, it can be a struggle. But then you just need to be in open communication with Peace Corps that it's not working out and see what they can do to help with that. But your counterpart is a huge resource for you as well.
Questions?
Question.
We have two. Okay, we'll start in front and then we'll go to the back. Is that okay?
Mine kind of takes it back a little bit. I was wondering if you guys could touch on your like the application process and how you guys, went through it. If it was like easy for you guys, if you guys felt like it was highly competitive, if you guys all got it on the first time, if anybody got denied, kind of what you guys set you guys aside from other people, other applicants.
I don't know about the other two Peace Corps volunteers.
It's
'Cause I'm
changed since
not-
I applied.
Okay, so then maybe I'll talk about it because it's
Yeah.
different than what it used to be. It used to be horrendous. You'll hear horror stories about the past. Now it's pretty darn simple. It's all online for Peace Corps. You submit like a basic kind of questionnaire, an essay or two that are pretty simple about just like why you want to serve, that kind of stuff. And then now you can select your top 3 countries you wish to serve in, or you can say that you have no preference, which is what I did. And then you can select the top 3 sectors you would like to serve in. So Peace Corps does health, education, agriculture, economic development, youth and development, environment. Sometimes called forestry, I think. And so you can put those, or you can again say, I don't care, put me anywhere. And then I think they ask you minor health questions. And then after that, which is just like depending on how fast you write, but like the process is kind of like a 30-minute kind of application. I think they put it on the website, like be done in 30 minutes. You submit that, and then after that application, they'll put you under consideration for a country and a job. And then after that, you do an interview, and depending on how you interview and what they decide, you'll get invited, and then you can accept that or not. For me, like to the day, it was 1 month, that whole entire process. It just depends on when you apply. There are 4 different windows to apply for jobs during Peace Corps, where like they open it up, so like you can apply for these couple months, and then the next year you'll deploy between these couple months, and there's 4 of those. So it just depends on where you hit it. You might wait like a year to go. You might wait a couple months to go. It's pretty simple now.
Yeah, mine looked different than that, so I'm not even.
Yeah. The binder years.
And Grace, I'm assuming yours was different in the application. Okay, so we'll just stick with what Leah did since that's the most
So much
recent.
nicer now.
I guess Hannah or Lauren.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I remember it was online, and it was, I think I filled out basically my education, any work experience I had. I had to write like a short personal statement, and then I had to call some number to be like, yes, I'm committed to like doing all of these things. I'm sorry, I'm struggling. Yeah, no, I didn't have to do that for Vista.
I missed that step.
I'm really struggling to remember. Because it was I think I applied sometime maybe late 2015, and I found out in April of 2016. But also for NCCC, depending on what time you apply for. So I applied for the session or the year that started in October, so I knew there are 5 campuses in NCCC. So there's Sacramento or San Francisco, somewhere in California. I didn't go there, obviously. There's Denver, Colorado, which is where I was placed. Baltimore, Maryland. Vicksburg, Mississippi, and then Vinton, Iowa. I don't know where I remember that. But based off of when I applied, I could either go to California or Denver. And so they sent me to Denver. But yeah, it took a couple of months to figure out if I got in, and I got an email that said, congratulations, you're going to Denver. And I had to fill out other medical history paperwork. But it's not competitive. It is competitive. Thousands of people apply every year. Not everyone gets in. But there were 300 people in my class. So yeah, there were a lot of us. Lots of different teams and stuff. So you have a good chance, especially I think if you have your college degree and stuff like that and work experience.
Yeah, in Vista, I wish this is how all jobs worked. It was it's the best, like just streamlined application process. So you do one big AmeriCorps application, which is probably
Yeah.
similar to what Hannah
that's-
did, where they're asking just like basic, like upload your resume,
Mhm.
like fill out personal history statement, whatever. Okay, and then you go through, and there's like every Vista job listing ever, and then you just and it really depends on I could have applied for a job if they looked at my application, called me back a week later, I could have started. It took me probably 5 to 6 months of like finding where I wanted to be, and like I was being picky about location and time, and then I think competitiveness, like I definitely applied to a lot of places and like never heard back, but then there were places that I like interviewed. I think that I interviewed with 3 or 4 places before I found this one that I wanted to do, and they offered me a job, but it just wasn't in like a location that I wanted to be or something like that. And yeah, just in competitiveness too, depends on where you want to be, because even like huge organizations like just like really like famous nonprofits, like if you want to be like Habitat for Humanity headquarters, like those are going to be like very competitive Vista assignments. Like being out in the middle of nowhere on a reservation was not very competitive. So it just depends, but it was a super easy process.
That answer your,
Yeah, that was.
alright, go for it.
Okay, going off of like communication with your coordinators and stuff, I guess first of all, did you feel overall just safe in your locations? And if need be, like, was it easy to communicate with like your organizations? And like, if you did need attention or care, like, did you feel as you got like adequate attention or like good enough, I guess, medical attention if you needed it?
So I'll say for Peace Corps, there's like general Peace Corps stuff that applies to every country, but every country has what's called a country director, and who your country director is during your service is how your service is gonna go. So if you have a really good one, it's gonna be good. If you have a bad one, it's gonna be bad. But I think for a lot of Peace Corps countries, you'll have. So we always had 2 doctors. We had one that was a host country national, so a Malagasy person, and then we had one that was an American person. I don't know if I know some places they were really small, they only had 1 doctor, so I think that just depends on how many volunteers you have. I can say personally for me, I had a lot of medical problems when I was in Peace Corps, and I just got really lucky and happened to be living within a day's drive of the capital, which is where medical was located, but there were still times where like my medical care was like, send me a photo of that, I'll tell you if you need stitches. I actually had a person message in a Facebook group that said, does anyone have service right now? I desperately need to send a photo of a machete cut into the doctors and know if I should get stitches. And he had to send it to me. I had to email it to the doctor, and then we had to get the message back to him, go get stitches, please. So it just depends on where you live and how good the communication is in that country, and just who your staff and boss happen to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely depends. The Philippines is unique because it's made up of so many different islands. So I was next to a really large city, and I had decent access to kind of a hospital and healthcare near me. But other people who were in more rural areas on more rural islands, if it was pretty serious, they would have to take kind of a overnight ferry or 12-hour public transportation ride, or even fly, in order to get adequate healthcare service. And so it really depends on kind of where you are, how spread out things are. But Peace Corps is usually, I found, pretty responsive to kind of medical issues and medical needs that people have. And they're pretty responsive for other things as well. And then my site, just the organization that I was at, because it was really helpful because they had already had experience working with Americans. They knew just kind of how to communicate with me really well, and so when something would come up, they would take it seriously and really were great at communication, but that also helped because they had had experience for several years working with Americans, whereas being kind of the first American in your site, I think it's just going to look different. But I feel like Peace Corps overall is usually pretty responsive. I don't think they always have been, and again, this goes back to the accountability piece, because they have that spotlight on them. I think they've taken a lot of initiative the past couple of years to provide better and faster healthcare service to their volunteers.
Grace, do you have anything to add to that?
And just to add to that quickly, for my country as well, they really encourage kind of your counterparts to even go with you to the hospital if it's something that is urgent. I had to go towards the end of my service, and my counterpart is now in my will because of what she had to do for me at that hospital. And so that is encouraged, especially if you're new there, for kind of translating and just kind of language barriers and cultural barriers within that healthcare setting. It is encouraged, especially kind of in your first 6 months or so, for your counterpart or a host family member to go with you to the hospital. But depending on where you are, you're also given kind of a local clinic or somewhere to go that Peace Corps has already identified as kind of where you can go that's close to you. And then if something kind of bigger comes up, they'll take kind of larger steps.
Y'all had access to.
Yeah, I lived in a city where having access to medical care, but I will say that with other issues that might come up, I definitely was, because my team was spread all over the country. My boss lived in Denver, and AmeriCorps was really responsive with any issues that I had with bosses or just anything else that was going on. So I always felt safe and always felt good. They were willing to stick up for you, for sure.
I would agree with that. AmeriCorps also gives you, they don't call it insurance, I don't think. Did you get it? It's like IMJ,
Yeah.
it's like IMG or something, yeah. It's basically just they'll pay for it, if something goes wrong. But, yeah, even in CCC, when we lived in a state park, someone got hurt and it was relatively, there was no issue taking them to the emergency room or anything like that, so, yeah, I always felt safe.
So, obviously, you all have shared a little bit about what you were doing in these assignments that you had. Can you tell us what the experience that you had, what did it actually do for you? How did it, changes of any perceptions or life changes or anything along those lines that you would care to share?
I feel like I have so many that sometimes aren't obvious to me. Definitely I learned a lot about being independent and confident. And just I learned how to advocate for myself really well. Which I think I would see a lot of patients who, actually I'll talk about this from students. In Malagasy culture, when you go to the schools, and I taught in a school for a while, the kids just address you as teacher, and whatever you say is just law as a teacher. I walked in and it was my first day to teach. I didn't know that we were supposed to stand up. I didn't know we were supposed to say a prayer. I didn't know we were supposed to clean the board. And my students didn't even they were oh, apparently we don't do this anymore. And I was guys, you didn't, someone came to check on me and they're oh, you didn't do these 5 things. And I was you could have told me. And no, I could have said anything wrong that I wanted to and my students would have accepted it. And there's this culture of being taught in that way. And I also saw that mirrored in the clinic, where I had really good clinic staff, but if a doctor were to say something, they are the trained professional, they know. And I think I saw that in a very clear way that I had never seen it in America, which I know that happens here, but I've never really seen it from my point of view because I don't hang out with other people at the doctors and see how they interact with the doctor. And I think I learned a lot about patient advocacy and how sometimes you say something and it may prevent someone else from speaking up just because they see you in a position always to try to listen before you say something. And I think I learned a lot about approaching people with the idea that they probably in some topic are definitely far more advanced than I am. I got dropped in Madagascar and within 3 days I was at my host family and I knew how to say 2 words, one of which was dog because I'm just an animal lover. And I got to my host family and they were just talking all around me and they were saying things and they had a dog and I just pointed and said dog and they were so proud of me. And I just thought that was the most generous thing. And my mom was touring me around and being here's how to use an outhouse. And here's how to wash your clothes. And let's be real, I did not really know how I was supposed to get light in that outhouse. I did not know how to wash my clothes without a washing machine. That just seemed really foreign to me. And so really looking at people as opportunities to learn something. It's not a professor or something like that.
Mine would be very similar to that, is being able to go in as a learner into any circumstance or any situation, and being able to view everybody that you encounter as someone that can teach you something. And related to that is learning how to observe before responding or before acting, and trying to initiate something that could be offensive or not practical or realistic for that setting. So being able to learn and then being able to learn from anybody and everybody. And I think that is something that is both personal and professional, right? This is something that we can use in every single aspect of our lives, is being able to view other people as learners. I think we can see that just kind of in culture with how we relate to people who have different opinions than us, and how we engage in just conversation, is being able to approach people as teachers in our lives, and being able to observe how people interact, how people communicate, and being able to mimic that, not in a way that is fake or insincere, but being able to mimic that in a way of respecting where other people are coming from, and respecting their culture and their thoughts, their beliefs, and all of that, and being able to use that in a respective way to engage just in deep relationships with people. And I think that's what it comes down to, is being able to form relationships, being able to build community with people that can be very unlike yourselves, and being able how to do that well has advantages across the board.
You guys wanna keep going, panelists, and then I'll have Grace answer in a second.
Sure, I'll go. So sort of going off that, major learning experiences, my team is made up pretty much all of like liberal, young, 18 to 24-year-olds, and we got placed into a lot of conservative communities. So that was something that was really interesting. It was something we had to, learn how to have a conversation, especially in this political climate, because we were, I was in NCCC during the election, so I was learning how to have conversations with people. That was something that I took away from that program, and listening to people, hearing what they have to say without prejudging them. And it's something I'm still working on. But I would say, while I learned like different skills, like I know how to trail build now, and I did like disaster relief for flooding and wildfires, so I have a really like random skill set. But I would say in that program, I just learned the most about myself. I am nothing like I was when I graduated from undergrad. I can like you said, advocate for patients. I can advocate for myself. I have such a backbone now, more than I ever had a couple years ago. So that's really what happened to me in America. Like, I just learned more about myself, and I learned what I liked and what I didn't like, and ultimately just what I wanted to do and how to stand up for myself, really.
Yeah, I think that little bits of all of this was true for me as well. I think specifically for me, I really learned how to put myself in someone else's shoes, but like I had to take history into account. Like, it took a while for me to be like, why are these people like being so mean to me? Like, I just am like bright and sunshine and rainbows, and I'm here to help, and yay. And then I was like, oh my god, like this is really negative for them to have a white person or like someone that looks like me come in and try to tell them what to do. And I was just like, it was, you know what I mean? Like, I had to really be like, oh man, I'm sorry for everything, but I'm gonna try to help. And then just learning how to, for me, it was, AmeriCorps is normally really structured. This specific program was not as structured as Vista can be in certain organizations. And so for me, they kind of were like, okay, like, here's our problem, and here's a computer, like, bye. And so I was like, okay, like learning how to act as your own resource and how to be a resource for people that, like, you only have a year with Vista. It's a year-long program. And so learning how to be like, okay, like, how can I help? Let's dive in. Like, I'm gonna get to know you while we're doing this, but like, we need to start doing something. And so really learning how to just like function and get stuff done and that like you're capable of doing things for your community that you didn't think you were capable of doing. So more sunshine and rainbows. But it's still hard.
But like with thought.
Yeah, but yeah. With some
Thoughtful
background.
sunshine,
Yeah.
Grace, do you have anything to add to that? So we only have about 5 more minutes. Does anybody have a burning question? If not, I have one last one that I'll ask them. But if anybody has something, and Blakely, you're included too. Blakely's online with us. I don't know if she's got something or not. My question was just after you came back, talk about some of the perks of doing the service that you did and what that has given you opportunities and doors that has opened based on, like Rachel said at the beginning, just having this on your resume, you know, has it helped, has it not helped, what are things that have benefited you from your service in terms of just opportunities? And maybe we can just do maybe 1 or 2 Peace Corps and then one, I don't know, all of you can talk, it doesn't matter.
I can answer that. I mean, I am 30 years old and I'm the director of a program at a university, just to kind of give you a snapshot. It looks really good on a resume, honestly. I get to go to great conferences that you have to apply for, that only take a certain number of people. You get to engage in just different lifelong learning activities. But yeah, I mean, I think just my job that I currently have speaks volumes to the impact that it can have. It pushed me 5 steps forward than if I had stayed in the United States, honestly, and had worked somewhere, a nonprofit or a social service here like locally. It pushed me several years ahead of where I would be right now.
Well, and she's taking her own students back to the same site with a study abroad course this summer, right? So, I mean, like, it's going full circle, which is pretty cool. So,
Yeah, I would say definitely several steps forward, like where I feel like if I just graduated from undergrad and gotten a job, which would have been fine, and like I'm sure I would be very happy and probably still in the same program eventually, maybe, I don't know. But I definitely think that it gave me a lot of direction was the biggest thing, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in this. I had experiences in my program that led me to want to do public health, and then applying for schools with AmeriCorps was like super easy. People were impressed and thought it was like an awesome thing that you did, and yeah, so I think it was super helpful, and it was just like 1 year and I learned a lot. I don't know. So I would definitely recommend doing it for resume purposes and to help people, but resume purposes too.
Yeah, and to add to that, since mine was more like on a national level, I have contacts in like 4 or 5 different cities now. My project we were in Little Rock, and we were so involved with the city government there that I feel like I could apply to any job that I feel like generally qualified for, and I'd at least get an interview. But also with AmeriCorps, this isn't like the only reason you should do it, but you do get money. I mean, you get paid like $150 a week. It's nothing. More for Vista, yeah, but still like enough to live on. But they get what's called, it's like your Segal Education Award. And so since you can get 2 full awards. So coming into this program, my two full awards were a little over $11,000, which I have to use that for education. You can use it to pay off student loans. I'm using it to pay what my scholarship doesn't cover here. If you're older, like, cause Vista, you could be any age. You can give it to like your children.
Continuing ed classes.
Yeah.
School materials, you could buy like a laptop or something.
Zumba classes.
Yeah.
Like, literally, there are tons of people that will take it. Tons of organizations. Autism schools will double it, up to 2 awards, I think. Yeah, that makes sense. But that's another really big incentive to do it.
For me, I went to grad school because of the Coverdale Fellowship, which it's something that if you serve as a Peace Corps volunteer, even if you do something unfortunate like a medical evacuation, which was what I did, if you serve to the best of your ability, you come back, you are eligible for it. And here at ETSU, it's covering my tuition, and then it also has me in a GA position. And so that's like the only reason I was able to do grad school.
Yeah, and then isn't there a little bit of funding that, like, to come back to the US and get your
Yeah,
life started, don't you guys get a little bit
Right.
with Peace Corps?
Right now, for every like month that you're in Peace Corps, they like save money for you. So when you come back to the US, if you do the full 2 years, right now it's coming out to like 9,000 is what you get when you come back. I got like half that because I did half the service. But yeah, it's like 9,000. It's called resettlement allowance, and then it's not like so how much you get paid in your country is impacted by what country you live in. This is just any Peace Corps volunteer gets it.
So just so when you recognize that when you're leaving that service that you've done, you do have opportunities afterwards to transit, and you're not just like, oh, I gotta go live on my parents' couch for the rest of my life and figure out what I'm gonna do now or something like that, which is totally fine if that's what you need to do, but just don't do it forever. Give yourself a window and then move on. But yeah, anyway, just I wanted to let y'all know there's kind of some opportunities afterwards.
And as someone who works, I'm on a committee here that reviews admissions for the NVH program. We look for that. I mean, we really do, and it's like, well, this is an easy one to kind of consider, because look, this is what they did, because it shows the things that you were contributing to, so whether it's true or not, it makes you a good student prospect, so we love it, you know.
And let me add to that, I'll just be totally honest, I did not do well in undergrad. And I'm almost positive AmeriCorps is what got me into this program. I'm like 99%.
Well, I think one of the things that I'll agree with Dr. Blackwell when we are reviewing admissions for both doctorate and master's programs, everybody went to school, so everybody has a bachelor's, everybody has a master's if you're applying for a doctorate. You probably did pretty well, you know, you might have had a little blip here and there. So knowing that you have some good soft skills that make you able to have active discussion in the classroom, that you can navigate difficult conversations, you can listen to people and learn from them, things like that. Those are soft skills that we are not going to take the time to teach you, because we're trying to teach you the book as well as this knowledge that you need to know. But we really want you to have the soft skills, so then we end up spending time on those skills. And then it's like this convergence when you end your degree and you're in your field placement and your preceptor's like, wow, you know how to like send an email. This is amazing. And those of you who know how to send an email already are like, no one else in my cohort could send an email, you know, or something like that. And so just, and it's something as small as that you kind of know that if you've served in one of these capacities, we know you've got that already, because you've had to deal with something way harder than that. And I think that's just a really key piece of it when we're reviewing applications. It's just something we see and we're like, they'll probably figure it out. Whatever happens to them, they'll make it. They'll figure it out. They're resilient, those types of things. So just know that it translates in other experiences too. You don't have to do Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, but they are great opportunities to do some service. and it looks good, and y'all can see how great these people are. So, other last final questions, because we're at 6:33. Any parting words, Grace or the rest of the panel? All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, wait, before you go,
Oh yeah.
Dr. Quinn and I,
Oh, geez, I didn't know there
the
was
panel
another.
is in it.
Oh. There's something.
So here at ETSU, if you're interested in the Peace Corps, if you're interested in global health, whether you're an undergrad or a graduate student, we've got some different options. So we have for the undergraduate program, we have what's called a Peace Corps Prep program. And I apologize if you've heard this from me too many times. So the Peace Corps has developed some university programs that schools can apply for to either help students get funding when they return from the Peace Corps, or to actually be more prepared when they go out to the Peace Corps. So we actually have both of their programs, and one of them is the Peace Corps Prep, and that is a list of coursework that you complete along with those foreign language requirements that you need, with the volunteer hours that make you the most applicable for Peace Corps. So we have one of those programs. Since ETSU doesn't recognize that as an official certificate program, we have also tacked on a minor to go with it. So we have a global health and development minor that undergrads can do. You can do just the Peace Corps Prep and not the minor, although if you do the Peace Corps Prep, you pretty much get the minor for free. Or you can do just the minor if you're not interested in Peace Corps but do want to learn more about global health.
Yeah.
So at the graduate level, we have the Coverdell Fellows, which was mentioned, that can help fund your education once you come back from the Peace Corps. So once you're a returned Peace Corps volunteer, you can apply for schools that have been awarded the Coverdell Fellows, and it helps with your funding. You may get a guaranteed GA, you may get additional stipends or things like that, depends on the school. But we are one of those schools, so if you're looking at a Master in Public Health or even a Doctorate in Public Health, if you're already in an MPH, you can come back and apply for the Coverdell Fellows. We also have a Global Health Certificate for graduate students. So if you're doing an MPH and you want to tack on a certificate, or if whenever you graduate from your undergrad, if you want to do a certificate program but not a full degree, we do have one in global health. It is interprofessional. You do get to travel abroad for this one, and it's a great experience.
Yeah.
And Dr. Quinn is the coordinator for Coverdell Fellows and Global Health Certificate, and I'm the coordinator / advisor for the Peace Corps Prep and the Global Health and Development minor.
Yeah, and just to, if you did Peace Corps Prep and you decided not to go into Peace Corps and you wanted to go into AmeriCorps instead, you're not like, you don't have to go into Peace Corps. It's just a package deal that makes you really ready to go into kind of any fellowship or job. It's made up for Peace Corps, so you're going to have all of their requirements. But if you have Peace Corps, you're likely going to be able to translate that to other service positions as well. And then the Global Health Certificate at the graduate level is fully online. So if you moved and wanted to do that somewhere else, you could always do that. All right. Well, thanks for your time, and we'll get out of our stuff
here if you want any handouts.
Likely, we're going to log off of the WebEx session.